Imagine this. You are a police detective in 1920 Chicago, and a lovely woman finds her way into your office. She asks you to do something about a gang that has been pestering the streets for over 2 years now. It's called the Metro Gang, and they are quite the abrasive bunch. The head of the club is a man called Burton Equation, and he has dirt on pretty much everyone in this town. Enough to keep his territory in his grasp. The woman's request is pretty simple. Do something about it. But actually this time, as reports of the gang's activities have gone straight into the trash many times before. You've been a detective for a while now, but not being able to do anything about this gang and their shenanigans have left you rather disappointed in your job. Maybe she's right. Maybe something actually needs to be done this time. You are Zachary Burton, and this time, f*** the process.
LambdaGeneration.
What you are seeing on screen right now is a mod for Half-Life 2 called the Burton Equation. It's been the brainchild of David Driver Grom, aka Kralik, who has been working on this with a team of people for the better part of 6 years alongside all the other stuff that he works on. You know, Raising the Bar Redux and its sister mods, Go Regulation, and of course, Half-Life 2 RTX in collaboration with Nvidia, among other things. This man's busy. How does he do it? It takes place in the 1920s, at least initially. You fight your way through the many alleyways, warehouses, and storage yards of Chicago's warehouse district against the Metro Gang. A gang that suspiciously looks a lot like a familiar enemy we as players have faced before. What's going on here? After fighting for Burton Equation, the gang's leader, for the first time, something very clearly seems off when he decides to just teleport away before you can deal the final blow. It's the 1920s. That's not normal. But eventually you also teleport away yourself, and it becomes clear that this isn't just a normal teleportation to another place. No, this is time travel. Burton ends up traveling through time to different locations, all while Burton has been trying to give the Earth to the Combine. Because yes, the Metro Gang is just a front for the Combine trying to assert their dominance over the planet in different time periods. You visit the 1940s, where the Metro Gang have seemingly taken over the German forces, the 1980s, where Burton is apparently a very successful businessman with a whole building and multiple meeting rooms. And last but not least, we go to the 2010s where, you know, the Combine has fully taken over and where we get to face Burton one last time as some high-ranking guy within the Combine. It's a pretty interesting story and concept for a mod, and I was excited for it when it got announced all the way back in early 2022. I even already made 2 videos about its announcement and first media update all the way back then. The mod kept getting updates after that over on its ModDB page, and then on December 27th, 2024, the mod finally released fully on Steam, with its first patch coming out on the 1st of January. The mod now sits on Steam for free with a very positive rating, so that must be a good sign, right? Well, we're about to find out. I played the Burton Equation multiple times all the way through at this point, and I definitely have opinions. Does this mod live up to the hype I had for it personally, or is it a swing and a miss? Let's sink our teeth into it. Before we dive into the Burton Equation, let me explain something. The Burton Equation is made up of 4 different chapters, or episodes as I like to call them. Each episode is basically its own standalone thing because after each episode is finished, you're booted back to the main menu. Then you have to pick the next chapter yourself. I'll be tackling the mod episode by episode. The first episode of the Burton Equation is called Noir, and it takes place in 1920 Chicago. And we're greeted by the first cutscene in the mod.
Sometimes the places we know the most are the places we like the least. I'm Zachary Burton, police detective. Not that I've had much pride in my job for a long time anyway. The streets have been run by the Metro Gang for 2 years now. Corruption is everywhere. Reports dropped in the trash before they ever make it to my desk. For Burton Equation, the head of the operation. He's got dirt on everyone. He never leaves his territory. So here I am, stuck in place, without ever a lead to follow. And that's why I heard out this woman who pranced in my office. She, pleaded with me to do something about them. Maybe I want to change, or maybe I just needed a pretty dame to send me on my way. Either way, this process ain't working. It's time to try something new.
As you can tell, the mod is a pretty interesting way of getting the story across to you. It does it in the form of comic panels that fit the time period's aesthetics. It's quite a cool concept, and I love the artwork used here. Although, there is a slight problem. You see, the voiceover doesn't really match the panels and the text that's being displayed sometimes.
The Mitch gang were more prepared than I thought. I knew they were just waiting for me to make a move. But they have the streets locked down. I gotta take the fight to them in the warehouse district. That's the hole for brains dug himself into.
Sometimes Burton has more dialogue than what actually appears on screen. Luckily, there are regular subtitles, but those disappear halfway through this first cutscene as well. This gets worse later on because the other comic cutscenes don't have subtitles at all. I think this could be a little bit better, at least make sure that the normal subtitles are always visible. I think that would go a long way here. Anyway, after the first comic scene, it's time to start moving. Let's put on our hats and grab our .38 Magnum and let's head out on the streets. Using the fire escape, of course, like a real badass. And it doesn't take long before we run into the Metro gang, weapons ready. But this time, Burton ain't afraid of shooting back. Gotta admit, it starts a bit abruptly. The Metro gang in this bar just kind of starts shooting you immediately on sight without asking any questions, but hey, the mod has to get started somehow. This episode mainly takes place in alleyways, narrow streets, yards, and warehouses, and it looks pretty nice. There is a lot of detail and things to look at, not to mention the pretty sweet looking 3D skybox with these spotlights on the buildings. It gives this episode a pretty nice and distinct look. And the black and white filter over everything is a nice touch as well. The alleyways can be a bit claustrophobic after a while though. There are plenty of open spaces to spread out a bit more as well, but this part of Chicago definitely feels pretty corridor-ish at times. Now when it comes to the gameplay, the Burton Equation is a really standard shooter all things considered. The fun really comes from the different weapons you can use per episode, because each episode has its own set of weapons you can use. This episode gives you the M1911 pistol to use first, after which you obtain the M1927 Thompson to spice things up a bit. And later in the episode, you get a punchier, upgraded version of it with what I assume is Combine tech enhancing it. Now it can also shoot out energy balls like the Pulse Rifle in Half-Life 2. Pretty neat. Alongside those weapons, Burton always carries his trusty revolver and his fists that he can use in any time period. And one more weapon that he has is his foot. When you press the V key, Burton will kick the snot out of an enemy, object, or door that's right in front of him. It's just really fun to punt a Metro goon across the room with this. The firefights are also more enhanced with the increased punch these weapons seem to have. And there also seems to be new effects like more exaggerated explosions and bullet impacts that add to the atmosphere a bit. It looks and it feels great. What also makes the combat a bit more interesting are these pickups that you can find throughout that will give you something special. You have two kinds of pickups. A golden hat that will give you maximum health up to 250 HP, normally you can only collect health up to 150. And there is a golden revolver that lets you dish out double the damage you normally do for a few seconds. This is extremely handy for large scuffles, and that's exactly where it usually appears, so be sure to look for it. Talking about looking for something, if you look around these episodes thoroughly, you might find something secret. As far as I know, each episode contains a DeLorean somewhere in the level. You know, from that movie series everyone loves? Future! To the back! When you press the U key on the car, it will travel back in time and leave behind some goodies for you to use. In this time period, it left behind some grenades, which you cannot normally find here, obviously, and this will be different for each time period. So while you're doing a lot of shooting, at least it's made kind of fun. But that's not all we're doing all the time. There are also some puzzle elements here and there. In this episode, we have to find a fuse for this garage door to open so we can pass through. And we got to do this twice. The first time is obviously pretty easy. The fuse can be found somewhere in the same garage. But the second time is made a little more difficult. Having you go outside of the... Wait, is that it? Yeah, so the silhouette of the fuse is already shown the moment you step out of the garage, removing the whole search part, basically. After a while of shooting every gas mask wearing chump on the streets of Chicago, you finally get to Fabrine, who's held up in his very own warehouse. He puts up quite a fight, but after damaging him a bit too much for his liking, he decides to...
You got lucky, boy. But you ain't have no idea what you're in for. See you later. Much later.
Teleport away.
Where'd he go?
Burton, feeling like there is a lot more going on here than he initially thought, heads back to his office to call for backup, all the while being praised on the radio for his valiant efforts.
And we think he ought to be getting a hero's welcome back to his office.
Heading back is not super easy though, because the Metro Gang sure isn't done with you yet. While yes, you have to backtrack here, you actually do take a slightly different path back to your office. Some walls have been knocked down and other pathways have been opened to make sure you're not just playing the exact same map again, but backwards. And of course, there are more gang members in your way to get rid of. Once we get to our office, through the front door this time, we find out that calling for backup is not gonna happen.
Phone line's cut.
Darn the Metro Gang and their license to carry scissors! But just as Burton sits down to recover from what has just transpired, the world suddenly turns white.
When I woke up, the world was on fire. As soon as I finished reading that note, I found myself falling into darkness. Thought maybe I just passed out from all the blood and sweat, but then I heard gunshots, explosions, saw hard concrete walls. It only took me a second to recognize what this was. Another great war. I didn't know why I was here, but I can't shake the feeling that wherever Fabrine disappeared to, this was it. This guy and his gang's here too. We've got unfinished business.
Burton wakes up, but he's no longer in his office, and the world is now sepia colored? Wow, we gained a singular color. What an advancement. The color is, it's just brown, though. But hey, progress. Episode 2, Sepia, takes place in the 1940s, specifically during World War II. But instead of just fighting the regular German soldiers from the time, you're fighting German combine soldiers. Their communication is even in German. That's a nice touch. And with this theming obviously comes locations to match. The entire episode basically takes place either in the tight corridors of a German bunker, or outside of the bunker in the tight trenches running like veins across the land. It sure is a pretty interesting setting, especially with all the combine equipment being mixed with the old-timey war equipment. I especially love the skybox with the moving clouds and the occasional fighter jets flying past, making the place feel a lot more atmospheric. The weapons you obtain from these German combine soldiers are also, of course, from the time. Alongside your standard revolver, you now also have the P.08 Lugger as your pistol, which, in my opinion, just kind of sounds kind of bad. You got the MP40 submachine gun, and for the first time, you get an RPG called the Panzerschreck. I wonder if it has multiple layers when you start peeling it. The Panzerschreck especially comes in handy when later in the episode you have to demolish some sort of APC. Oh, also, they're pretty great against the hunters. Oh yeah, you're fighting hunters in this episode. Our first non-humanoid enemy. Man, I'm glad Germany didn't actually have those back in the day. Alongside hunters, you also have hopper mines to watch out for. Stay on your toes. I think this chapter is overall pretty fine, although I feel it does get a little bit monotonous after a while. The bunker you're in has a bunch of pathways that all look kind of the same, and the rooms you go through also have the same look to them pretty much. Coming outside to the trenches is kind of the same story, although there is a bit more variety here in the form of more open spaces and the visual eye candy that is the level of detail on display here. Seriously, this episode, just like the previous one, passes on the detail test with flying colors. Or, should I say, flying sepia. Anyway, it looks great. But yeah, even the trenches, after a little while, get a little bit monotonous. But then again, maybe this is exactly what being in the trenches and bunkers of World War II should feel like. And maybe this is just meant to closely resemble that. The music is also something I'm not entirely certain about here. They decided to go for a more swing-ish sound for this time period, but I kind of expected something a bit more orchestral. Maybe my brain is wired to expect that kind of music because all of the other games and media portraying World War II has orchestral music, but the music used in this episode seems a bit too cheery maybe for what this time period really was. But then again, I don't mind some good swing music. I'd love to listen to it outside of the mod, but I'm not entirely convinced it fits well here. Eventually, after making your way through bunkers and trenches, you get to a radio tower.
Well, fancy seeing you here, detective. I warned you about having the stones to see this through, boy. It's bigger than you'll ever realize. Time to die!
Oh, I knew it. The bastard's thrown in with these outer space goons. The pillar's gotta go. Some dynamite ought to do the trick.
Once you fight off the enemy forces and you've planted all the bombs, the tower gets destroyed. Fabrine, who's leading the battle here, gets annoyed.
You might have made this one, boy. Time in the world. I'll see you in the future, if you make it there.
And you get whisked away once again to another time period. Can you hear that? That music?
From the muddy trenches of another great war, I was propelled decades ahead into a bright neon glow. A new kind of America. One drenched in booze and color. As the criminal underground once again reared its head like it did in my time, I fell into old habits and spun up my magnum. I had a syndicate to topple and a skyscraper to scale, just like old times.
That's right. Burton wakes up in 1980s Miami. You know, the time period of some of the most iconic music, fast cars, palm trees, Tommy Frassetti, and apparently Metro gang people everywhere, trying everything in their power to murder you and bring the Earth into the grasp of the Combine. And hey, there is color now, albeit very exaggerated. It fits the aesthetic of the 80s pretty well, I'd say. Even the comic pages have taken on a completely different style as well, fitting in more with the current time period. Love it. We spawn on the streets of Miami, on which the Metro gang is trying to slaughter us. Of course, we slaughter them instead, and eventually we stand in front of a giant-ass building with Fabrine's name on it. Apparently, he escaped from the 40s all the way to the 80s and really became a household name here. Thinking that Fabrine must be at the top of this building and that this would be the perfect chance to finally kill him, you go inside and fight your way through many hallways, office spaces, staircases, and elevators.
What are you bloody playing at? Get this boarding up fast. Need to slow down the bastard somehow.
Eventually, the Metro gang becomes privy of your goal to reach the top and they start blocking up ways to the top from you. So you just smash a window and decide to climb the building from the outside instead, looking over this genuinely amazing looking cityscape. You know, I'd love to have this as a wallpaper. After climbing and fighting through the rest of the building, we finally make our way to the top.
Whoever said anything about fighting fair, pipsqueak?
Of course, Fabrine doesn't like to play fair and has firmly planted his butt inside of a helicopter to try and take you down using the turret it has. Luckily, you got an RPG, which usually helicopters are allergic to. So, after a few well-placed shots, you take it out of the air and have it crash on the building you're currently on. Anyway, Fabrine is dead, right? Now it's on to you to escape the burning building by going through many of the same areas you've been to before. Luckily, like in the first episode, some walls have been destroyed and some pathways are cleared, making it a lot faster to get down. But in the meantime, you're also dying from the smoke and the heat of the place, so it being faster to get to ground level is definitely a good thing. Once you finally make it to the exit of the building, you're ambushed by Fabrine's men who have been piling up there waiting for you. And is that Fabrine in the distance? Oh man, should have really taken the back door, huh? But luckily, before you're turned into Swiss cheese, you're taken away once again. This episode, I thought had a really nice energy to it. Me having a soft spot for synthwave music, the way the episode sounded was right up my alley. I'm pretty sure that the final track in this episode is based off of Turbo Killer by Carpenter Brut. At least it has that same energy and vibe to it. So far, the music in the Burton Equation has all been royalty-free music tracks, and they work well enough, I suppose. But the music in Miami was composed specifically for the Burton Equation by Slimek, and I absolutely adore it. Awesome job. The enemies are fun to kill, and the weapons you're given in this time period really help with that. Alongside your fists and your trusty revolver, you get, of course, a Glock 17 pistol, an Ingram Mach 11 submachine gun, your first shotgun, a Spaz 12 semi-auto, and the aforementioned rocket launcher, which is a FIM 92 Stinger. No more Panzerschreck, unfortunately. The pistol and SMG are great and pack a real punch. They're a real treat to use, but the shotgun has to be my favorite. Most of the episode takes place indoors and in smaller corridors, so this weapon is an absolute powerhouse here. Especially because you don't have to cock the gun every time you shoot it. The environments are also pretty nice and detailed, but I will admit that it suffers a little bit from the sameness issue that the previous episode had. Especially inside of the building, a lot of rooms and corridors do end up blending together here. Luckily though, there is the parkouring on the side of the building that you get to do that does mixes things up. And again, look at that skybox, it's amazing! Then there is the fight with Fabrine and his helicopter, which is a nice break of pace too, and you have to blow up a door at some point too, and you gotta stand your ground before the explosion actually happens. It's the little things like that that do try to keep you paying attention and break away from the constant shooting you're doing. Anyway, I think it's definitely an overall improvement over the Sepia episode. Could still use a bit of environmental variety here and there, but it tries to break it up a bit more with some grander set pieces, which really helps in this case. So far, this has to be my favorite episode, but we have one more episode to go. Will the Burton Equation stick the landing, or will it go out with a whimper? Let's find out in...
I found myself in a new kind of war. A revolution. I was a century away from my time. In a place I've never been. Seems it's as bad here as anywhere. The world and humanity. Enslaved by the bastards I've been fighting all this time. I don't have the element of surprise, but all I have is just my will, my guts, and my 38.
Burton finds himself waking up in the 2010s. You're now in City 17, fully taken over by the Combine, but their grip loosened a bit because of the Resistance. This episode really nails the style of regular old Half-Life 2. The comic story sections have a new style to them as well, there are no more filters during the gameplay either, and the weapons resemble that of Half-Life 2, although they are different models. In fact, the weapons we get to use here are of course the revolver and Burton's fists, but also the USP match, the H&K MP7 SMG, the Spaz 12 semi-auto shotgun, the crossbow, the AT-4 anti-armor rocket launcher, grenades, and you even get a OICW assault rifle, which is a weapon from the beta. Pretty cool. And yes, the shotgun is still my favorite. This last episode mostly takes place on the streets, apartments, tunnels, and other Combine-occupied zones of City 17. And naturally, we start on the streets, having to plow our way through hordes of Metro cops and Combine soldiers. Yes, Metro cops and Combine soldiers. No longer are they the Metro gang. The environments already feel a lot more spacious now. There are not as many tight corridors in this section of the episode, and it genuinely feels like something that could have come out of Half-Life 2. There are even snipers attempting to take you out from the other side of the street. You have ample cover to take, which is good, although I gotta say that they did get me pretty good during my first playthrough. Mainly because, well, second sniper. After our fight on the streets, it's time to take it down into the sewers and maintenance tunnels of the city. Yeah, we get some tighter corridors again, but this time with a catch. We fight zombies and headcrabs here. Yeah, this is such a nice breath of fresh air, to be honest. The shotgun really is your best friend here. At some point down here, we have to turn off some power in order to cross this puddle of electrified water. And we have to bring this valve to the other side of this long corridor filled with all kinds of headcrabs and zombies in order to crank this door open. So no, we're not just shooting stuff, we're shooting stuff and doing puzzles. I also gotta say that the music here is pretty great again. For this episode, the music was composed by Dimitron, and yep, it does sound a lot like the Half-Life 2 soundtrack. It's really well done and it sets the mood for this episode pretty nicely. Then eventually we make it back onto the surface and we take note of this massive building that must have some importance.
No doubt about it. That place. That's the key to all of this.
Burton decides that it's best to head over there, but we cannot just enter this building willy-nilly. No. This is the part where we have to fight several Striders in order to secure our path to the important building, which is pretty challenging in its own right. Luckily, we get the rocket launcher here, and I heard that Striders are also allergic to rockets. Hey! After defeating the Striders and the hordes of Combine folk protecting them, we make our way into the important building, which seems to be some kind of massive teleporter. Naturally, we follow our instinct and jump straight in.
If it isn't Detective Burton again. You're out of place, buddy, and you're out of time, too. You've got no pals to help you, no escape, end of the line. Come get me, Detective, if you've got the stones, that is.
The teleporter brings us to some kind of Combine facility? Is this the Combine overworld? Or is this meant to be inside of the Citadel? Where is it exactly? Anyway, as you have noticed, this episode is way more diverse when it comes to the stuff you do and the environments you come across. Like, way more. And I'm having an absolute blast so far. This really seems like it's the Burton Equation firing at all cylinders right now. You fight your way through buckets of Combine soldiers, and now also stalkers and turrets are involved. Until you find another teleporter. And when you jump in, it brings you...
You ought to know, boyo. I was working these guys long before you came on the scene. I had a good thing going, too, before you ruined it.
Back to the 20s? Yeah, this part of the episode is all about finding and activating teleporters and going back to the different time periods you've been to in the mod.
We both saw the Great War, Detective. You came back thinking you could make the world better. I came back knowing the truth. It's a dog-eat-dog world. So I figured, why not make the world mine? It ain't gonna be long until we're at each other's throats again anyways.
I think that's absolutely awesome. You get to see these time periods one more time before the mod ends. But not only are these nice, compact little sections to reminisce about your journey so far, but you also get to take some of the weapons from that time period with you back to the 2010s. Meaning that you can now use some of these weapons as well to fight off the remaining Combine forces in your way. And eventually, Burton Equation himself.
measures now, boyo!
The final fight with Fabrine is pretty interesting. You fight him kind of like the first time you fought him back in the 20s. You just keep shooting at him. But after he takes a certain amount of damage, the stage changes.
Only one left to fight between you and me, Zacky boys!
You see, the stage is made up out of these pieces of level from the 20s, 40s, and 80s respectively. So you start the battle with chunks of the 20s to fight through, and then the 40s, and then the 80s, and then for the last stage, it's all combine-ified. Enemies from these time periods also show up to try and stop you. The final hurrah of the Metro Gang, huh? But of course, you're way stronger than Fabrine.
Well. Zacky boy, this is it. Press that button and we're both toast. This place, all we've done, all gone.
You end up shooting him enough for him to end up giving up. Being teleported to some kind of combine core, you guys start reminiscing together.
Both saw the Great War. Maybe you could have made this world better. Stopped another one. Or at least, stop this.
By my nature, Zachary. Can't blame a dog for its bite. When they shipped us out, they wanted killers.
You could have been better.
He looks incredibly beaten up. The Combine having provided him with synthetic replacements for his body that actually was partially destroyed when Burton took down his helicopter in the 80s. At this point, he's more machine than human. Fabrine accepts his defeat, and Burton decides that blowing this core to smithereens is a worthwhile cause.
No regrets, Zacky boy.
Not being able to escape, you two are destined to be killed in the explosion of the core.
Well, end of the line. Everything led to this. For me to die doing what's right. I always knew this line of work would kill me. Sooner or later. This might be the terminus of my story. Might be the end of the world, too. But in my gut, it was worth it. Yeah. My God. It was worth it.
Zachary Burton. A police detective wakes up in his chair inside of his Chicago office. In front of him, a woman who's asking for a favor. And that was it. The Burton Equation. Overall, I think I really enjoyed my time with it. I mean, I played this mod multiple times over before I even started making this video, which doesn't happen all too often actually. The shooting feels good and satisfying, the time hopping is interesting, and it does give each and every episode of this mod its own unique feel with the different enemy designs and different weapons that you can use throughout them. I like the overall plot and the ideas that this mod has as well. You know, hopping from time period to stop Fabrine and the Combine from taking over the planet earlier than they're supposed to. It has a lot of potential. However, I do think the mod misses the mark in some areas. Some of the level design, while generally detailed, can be a bit monotonous. The rooms and hallways of the Fabrine building in the Miami episode, for example, just kind of blend together in my memory. And so do the trenches in the Sepia episode, to be honest. My honest favorite episode has to be Terminus though, because it really does feel like the mod throws everything it has at you here. It feels like the most realized, most complete episode with a good variety of locations, obstacles, enemies to fight, and more. I just wish that the other episodes had an equal amount of energy to this final one. The comic bits at the beginning and sprinkled throughout the episodes are a nice touch though. I did complain about them earlier in the video and I still think they're not quite perfect, but at least they're trying something different and I really gotta give kudos to the mod creators at least for that. Although I got one more complaint here. In Terminus, there is one of these comic sections that is supposed to show a Combine soldier. Although, I've never seen a Combine soldier quite like this one before. And no, there is no enemy in the game that even looks like this, so what is this? Is it concept art? Was this supposed to be a design that they were gonna use at some point? Even if it is, the design looks so wildly different from a Combine soldier that I'm starting to wonder why they even put it here in the first place. One thing I haven't really talked about at all though in this entirety of the video is the voice acting. It's pretty good, I'd say. Zachary Burton was performed by Sam Warren and sounds exactly like how you'd expect a detective from the 20s to sound.
I've had some run-ins with these punks before, but they've really kicked it into high gear this time. I might be jumping into my grave here, but I'll be damned if I don't pull Fabrine down with me.
And Bozidar Tsekov, I'm sorry if I didn't pronounce your name good, did the voice for Fabrine Castrucci, who sounds more like a stereotypical Italian mafia goon.
You're like a bat out of hell, Zachy boy. Why don't I send you back there?
It mostly sounds pretty good, albeit a bit corny at times. But I have a feeling that that was the exact feeling that they wanted to go for here. Anyway, let's put an end to this video. Do I recommend the Burton Equation? Yes. While it has its flaws, it's a pretty good time overall. And it's also not a super long mod either. So it's perfect to just sit down for an evening or so and for experiencing some timey-wimey time-traveling shenanigans. You can download the Burton Equation for free on Steam by clicking the link in the description. And that's it for me. Hope you guys have been having a, alright 2025 so far, at least. I'm working on a lot more content for this year that you are not going to want to miss, so be sure to subscribe to the channel and make sure you ring that bell while you're at it. Salutations, and take care.
LambdaGeneration.